Hello, my name is Chauncey Franks. I am the TCU FCA Life and Character Coach. I am here with Brent Cunningham. He is the Assistant AD for the Compliance Office here at TCU. Our goal is today is really to talk about the world of compliance. And for FCA staff, one of the things that we've been very beneficial here at TCU, we work very closely with our compliance team, go through training with them twice a year. We always kind of laugh and joke. Sometimes we'll show up for training, but it's a test, and then we'll do the training after the test. But one of the things I really love about our compliance team is that they're very open. They've got each of their cell phone numbers, and one of the things that we always do when I communicate with our team, if we have a question about anything, like, hey, let's call before we have any action. So, Brent, if you can, just what is compliance 101 from a collegiate aspect viewpoint?
Yeah. So NCAA athletics compliance is, we have multiple different roles, and as far as interacting with our coaches, with our staff, our student athletes, but you can kind of incorporate all of that into four major things that we do. So first and foremost is we educate, right? So we're educators first and foremost. We meet with student athletes, we meet with coaches, staff members, the public, the community boosters, whatever it may be, and make sure everybody understands the rules that apply to them and how they apply to them and how to navigate that. Then we monitor. So we monitor those rules and make sure that everybody's following them to the appropriate standards. And then occasionally, we do have to investigate and then report. So some of our job duties do require investigating potential violations. And when they do come up, we report those to the NCAA. And that helps maintain a good atmosphere of compliance. It's healthy to report rules violations to the NCAA because we know there's so many rules, it's impossible to not break one here and there. So it's always healthy to actually report those violations to the NCAA when they do occur. But that kind of summarizes exactly what we do. There's three different divisions in the NCAA. You got Division 1, 2, and 3, and we all have our different rules. Some of them kind of cross over the same, but even at the Division 1 level that we're at, you've got a group of conferences called the Power Five that have additional rules that we can use to benefit our student athletes as best as we can. We're titled like the autonomy conferences. We have autonomy rules that other Division I schools can adopt if they'd like to do so. But that's how NCAA compliance is broken down. I would say those three levels, and then that's what we do from a day-to-day standpoint.
I love that. So one of the things that with FCA and being a FCA staff person, I like to tell our team that we are a guest on a collegiate campus. And so one of the last things that we would ever want to do is to get a team in trouble because we've committed some type of violations unaware, something we may not even been aware of. From your viewpoint, what are some of the benefits that you see with the FCA staff person connecting with the compliance office on their campus?
Yeah, from a compliance standpoint, from a best practices standpoint, I think it's important that any staff member, whether it's marketing, communications, FCA, that a relationship is built with the compliance office at any level. And I think that's the best way to ensure that rules are being followed, that there's not any inadvertent mistakes being made, and creating that relationship. It'll be different on every campus. Every compliance staff is built differently, has different viewpoints on certain things, different interpretations on certain rules. But here at TCU, we're fortunate to have a decent-sized compliance staff where we're able to reach out and create relationships and build relationships and maintain those relationships with all of our staff members here on campus. And I encourage a lot of FCA staff members around the country to reach out to their compliance office. Maybe they're at an institution where their compliance office is understaffed. They don't have that many people in there, so things can be a little cumbersome and overbearing on that compliance staff member. So they might not be the ones reaching out and creating that relationship, but FCA can do that, feel free to go to your compliance office and introduce yourself and build that relationship. And that way, when questions do come up, and if there's if you're unsure about something, if it would be a violation to do so, you already have that established relationship made, and you can reach out on the fly and get an answer.
That's good. So your team takes us through training. Is there like a compliance website? Just say, for example, there's an institute, maybe have a smaller program, maybe not, the relationship is not there, and it just maybe an FCA staff person wants to educate themselves. Is there like a compliance website where they can go and maybe go through some of that training? Or is there information out there that if their compliant office may be, hesitant or just, slow to get them and have opportunity to sit in front of them, but is there any other avenues where FCA staff person could also learn some of these training materials that y'all pass down on to us?
Yeah, the first and foremost, the NCAA's website has a number of educational materials that are available to the public to access at ncaa.org. There's a resources tab there with some educational materials on different topics, all types of different topics that can be accessed. The best approach obviously is to be educated by your own campus's compliance office. Like I said earlier, there's different interpretations, different viewpoints on those rules, how they're applied on different campuses. So I wouldn't want one a staff member from one athletics department to apply a rule that they read somewhere else incorrectly. But there's some third-party programs as well that usually compliance offices will contract with to disseminate rules information. I've seen some of those, which are good resources if you have the budget for the athletics department to purchase that, but not enough staff to actually meet one-on-one. Here at TCU, I mentioned earlier, we're fortunate to have a decent-sized staff in our office, and what we do, just to give some background on that, is we meet every semester, fall and spring semester, with all athletics department offices. As you kind of alluded to earlier, we meet in the fall, we educate, go over material that apply specifically to your group. So, we go over an FCA specific educational document, same as we would with our business office or our Spirit group, and then we'll in the spring meet again to see what you retain. Talked about that quiz earlier, and we try to make it fun. We do a quiz, for each department, and see what you retain from the fall, and then top winner, I think you might have had it before, gets lunch paid for by compliance. So it's a good little method that we've established. But you're right though. I mean, there's some situations where compliance might not be able to reach out in a grassroots effort with every staff member in the athletics department. So I do encourage to educate yourselves on rules, but if there's ever a question or a doubt on how it's applied, to reach out to a compliance staff member on campus. So
to give an example, one of the things that we do is if there's any question, like there's often times where we're doing our FCA huddles and we may be thinking about foods involved. And so it's simply just sending an email down to compliance or picking up the phone and calling down to the office, and they'll give us a response back. And normally when they will communicate back something to us, they will say it's permissible. And then that they would ask us to also put that request into writing, I guess, where y'all can file that away. Give us some examples of just maybe some possible compliance violations, just maybe some simple things that if you're not really aware that you can just, unknowingly be committing.
Yeah. So there's obviously an extensive list of different types of violations that could be committed, but there's, you can kind of lump them all under extra benefits, and that's the ones you most commonly see. It's when a student athlete's receiving some type of benefit that's not being made available to the entire student body population or the public, or maybe some segment of the student body population that they fall into. So extra benefits violations are the ones you see most often around the country, the ones that make the news, and they can range from the smallest amount up to thousands of dollars, and different types of fashion and how it's received by the student athletes. But it depends too on how an FCA staff is viewed by the athletics department, whether they're viewed as a athletic staff or if they're viewed as an outside group, essentially. So
explain that, because I think that's critical. At TCU, we're viewed as athletic staff.
Correct.
So explain the difference between being viewed as athletic staff or being viewed as outside view.
Yep. So there's there's some liberties that you gain being considered athletic staff, but then there's also some areas where you would commit a violation if you did something as an athletic staff member that you wouldn't if you were considered outside staff. So things that you get to do as athletic staff is occasional rides are permissible with student athletes, whether it be from a staff member or coach, and a lot of times that does come up, with whether it's a Bible study or a meal that you're trying to get to. It's permissible for you to provide those opportunities, those types of benefits for our student athletes. Meals in general, you talked about that. Occasional meals can always be provided to student athletes at any time. Just have to fill out a form, at least with our office. That's how that works. You fill out an occasional meal form, and then you're good to go from that standpoint. But as outside staff, you might just be considered a booster, not an athletics department staff member. And from that standpoint, what types of benefits you can provide get to be a little more convoluted and not as clear cut. And there's opportunities for boosters to provide meals. There's some parameters that are on there. Yep. As far as where that can take place, whether it's on campus or at the booster's home. And then rides, of course, boosters wouldn't be permitted to provide our student athletes with any type of extra benefits, including a ride. So in those types of scenarios, that's some differences in how you're viewed on your campus, as far as what might be a benefit, what might not be.
Okay. You use the word booster. Can you define from the lens of compliance what is a booster, and then can a booster interact with a student at a FCA sponsored event?
Mm-hmm. So a booster is going to be anybody, in short, who supports your athletics department in any way, shape, or form. Whether they've attended a game, whether they donate money, whether they've bought apparel for your school, whether they attended the university even, they're going to be considered a booster. And boosters' interaction with student athletes are permissible. They can always interact with student athletes. There's additional restrictions on how they can interact with recruits. They're not generally allowed to interact with recruits for the most part. So when it comes to boosters being involved in FCA, from our standpoint here on campus, if they're wanting to host a meal, they could do so at their home, either home or on campus. Those are the two locations that boosters are allowed to host an occasional meal. But as far as boosters interacting with our student athletes in general, we encourage that. They're good resources, good people to know. Usually have walked through these doors before and are good for internship opportunities, for example, as well. But boosters sometimes we need to make sure that they understand those rules that apply to them too. And here at TCU we do a good job of reaching out to our boosters, our donors, and informing them of the rules that apply to them. Every year we send out a newsletter to our entire directory of donors and make sure they understand that, so they're not inadvertently creating any rules violations with our student athletes.
That's good. Any just quick example, like the interaction that an FCA staff may be having with a booster, kids over in the house, any possible violations that could take place unknowingly, or just to say, hey, be aware, or just also a booster may have good intentions, but also we've seen individuals that have good intentions do things that are not good for the program. Any just kind of examples you would just say, just kind of be watchful for, mindful for, when you getting kids off the campus, maybe over to a booster's home, or any of that type of scenario.
Yeah, if in the example of an FCA Bible study event, if you're going to be hosting those with people in the community who aren't athletic staff, who would be considered a booster, just making sure that they know not to provide anything to the student athletes who are attending that event, whether that be at their house.
Like money?
Definitely not money. Yeah, definitely no money. No money, no gifts. Yep. Right now, we've got. We're in the Christmas season, right? So some inadvertent violations there out of the goodness of somebody's heart. You're hosting, you want to give a little trinket as a gift. A booster wouldn't be able to do that. Even an athletic staff member wouldn't be be able to do that. So we need to, it's good to know those things going into it. Even as an athletic staff member, not just a booster, we're not allowed to provide Christmas gifts to our student athletes, as that would be considered an extra benefit. So things like that could occur, out of the goodness of your heart, an act of generosity, would be an impermissible benefit, result in a violation.
Okay. What about gift cards? Say if we were giving away gift cards at a FCA Bible study, is that permissible?
So if it depends on who's involved in that FCA group. So if it's just student athletes, then no. But if we've opened up, if it's at a convention maybe, right? So on a larger scale, right? If there's some type of opportunity for not just TCU student athletes or who are involved in FCA, but anybody in FCA, because FCA is open to the public as well. It does have public members. Then in that type of instance, a student athlete could win a prize like that, because we talked earlier about an extra benefit being if it's only being offered to our student athletes, then it would be considered an extra benefit. But if it's being offered to them as a member of a larger segment, whether a segment of the student body population or a segment of the public, then they can receive those types of benefits, because they're not receiving it based on their notoriety as an athlete.
Okay, that's good.
Specifically at TCU.
So as FCA staff person, we often have interactions with recruits and prospect. How should a FCA staff person, if there's some things they should avoid doing, and what are some things that are permissible as well too, as far as meeting the on-campus potential recruit, meeting their family? What are some things, are we able to do that, and what are some of the things that we need to possibly avoid as well too?
So before we get into that, I'll define what a recruit is, a prospect. It's anybody who's started 9th grade. Okay. So whether they play a sport or not, they're considered a recruit in the NCAA's eyes, a prospective student athlete. So 9th through 12th grade students fall into that category. Now, off-campus contact, that isn't permissive for athletic staff members in FCA unless it's tied to a campus visit. So on-campus contact is permissible. So you'll see opportunities for recruits who come on official or unofficial visits to have meetings set up with different athletics department staff members while they're here on campus, and one of those being FCA. So it's permissible for you in that instance to have interactions with recruits while they're here on a visit. Now those visits can't occur until certain permissible dates that the coaching staffs are monitoring on. But while they are here on one of those visits, you can interact with them. If the visit does call for some off-campus outings, maybe for a meal, you got unofficial visits, you can go 1 mile from campus. Official visits can occur within 30 miles of campus. So if you're invited to attend that meal, for example, that's permissible too. That's the type of off-campus contact you'd be allowed to have with a recruit, only when they're here on a visit.
What about, and we talked about this, if you have a collegiate staff person who's a part of, as our role here at TCU FCA, go to a local high school and junior high, is it permissible for them to go speak at that huddle? Is there any possible violations or anything that we would have to avoid, or verbiage or anything in that scenario?
As far as speaking off campus, there's some opportunities within the legislation to speak at banquets or events that are occurring at different locations, but I would always give the basics, the basic information related to that to your compliance office to examine it and determine the permissibility of it, because there's different nuances that go into those rules and having speaking opportunities, speaking engagements off campus, but there's no blanket response, I would say, for that. Each compliance office would have to look at the facts that surround that.
Okay. So I think we joke about this. So I couldn't go to, say, Pascal High School and speak to a group of student athletes and say, okay, hey, you guys need to come to TCU. Would that be?
That wouldn't be allowed.
Okay.
So that's, as an FCA staff member who's considered athletic staff, that wouldn't be permitted from that standpoint, because we're not allowed to have that off-campus contact with recruits other than when they're here on a visit. So from that standpoint alone, you obviously wouldn't be able to do that. Now, in certain situations where FCA staff members aren't considered athletic staff, there might be some opportunities where they actually work with local high schools too, and do FCA for them. So there's probably some opportunities there. Now, if they're considered a booster of the university that they work for, they're still restricted from recruiting PSAs to attend that university. So they have that roadblock too. But that's a differentiation of, depending on how you're classified as staff.
What about phone calls, emails, texts, and social media with a prospective student athlete?
I mean, from a compliance standpoint, we always say don't do it. It's a conservative approach, but you won't break any rules. Now, there's opportunities for athletic staff to engage in some of those activities. Private correspondence, for example, after the first permissible date to do so, you can have that private correspondence, whether that's through a direct message or through an email or text message, for example. But in general, we wouldn't encourage interacting with recruits. But there's opportunities on social media though to engage. So there's a phrase in the compliance world called "click, don't type."
Yep.
So it's the easiest way to remember that. If a recruit posts something, you can click on it, whether that's like, favorite, retweet. But you can't type, so you can't reply to it. You can't quote tweet it. Can't share it with any additional text. No tagging recruits that involves typing. So in those types of scenarios, that's probably the extent of interaction with recruits that we would encourage or permit is just clicking on their posts, as long as you're not typing. Now, once they've signed with the institution, at that point, those restrictions are lifted, and you can have that public communication with the recruit. But up until then, it's click, don't type.
Click, don't type. And that's a good rule of thumb. That's one of the things where we tried to put into practice, and had also 2 times where you guys hit me in my DM and said, hey, take that tweet down. You can't do that. So I appreciate that. Is there anything else that we didn't cover when you think about FCA and just as a whole that that would be good just to communicate with the team?
Yeah, I mean, what you all do in your roles as FCA staff members is great work. I mean, with our student athletes, and we want to make sure that you all are in the position to be able to support them in the best way possible. And for other FCA staff members around the country, we want to make sure that they're able to do the same thing and not unintentionally create violations. And the best way to do that, we talked about earlier, is just get to know your compliance staff.
Yep.
Get to know them, get to asking them questions, go out to lunch with them.
Yep.
Just interact, have that open line of communication. And what we're doing and what you all are doing, we both have the same goals in place. We want to make sure our student athletes on campus are having the best, most positive situation, and opportunities afforded to them, and within the rules, of course, and making sure that they can take advantage of those things and have a good collegiate experience, graduate, and do well on the playing field too. So I think we all have the same mission, the same goals. So just always working and work side by side with each office.
That's right. Man, I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah,
I really
of course.
do. And team, FCA team, if you are not connected with your compliance office, highly recommend you do that. That's simple as just going on to your webpage for your university that you're working with to find that compliance tab. And what I find is that, as Brent said, that we're all on the same page. And I really think that your compliance team would welcome a call or email or just even an opportunity to sit down, because I think we all would rather be proactive than having to be reactive. And I think one of the things that for FCA staff person, I think we would be disappointed if we were to cause a university team some issues just because we didn't take the time to educate ourselves in the world of compliance. And so again, really encourage you to do that. It is a great honor for us to work with the compliance team, and they're great to work with. It's simple as picking up the phone call, shooting an email, and it's within a day we normally get an answer. And so if there's anything that we can do here directly at TCU, please just reach me. You can reach me at cfranks@fca.org, or just look me up and give me a phone call, and we'll help answer any possible questions. If there's even deeper questions, we'll reach down to our compliance department and get better feedback. So thank you guys.